All right, welcome back to Problem Solver Politics. I am your host, Cardinellis, with Cody the Oracle.
Hey, everybody.
And today we're going to be talking about a couple of things. First off, how on earth is coronavirus going to affect the election, especially in places like Washington, and so on and so forth? That's a big question in the news. And is this Bernie or Biden's last stand? There is some seriously deep statistical data here that's predicting a pretty large victory for Biden here, but that exact same data said that Sanders wasn't going to win Michigan yesterday last election cycle, and he did. He pulled off a 1 in 100 victory. And then also Andrew Yang is talking at an accent event. We're going to dive into a little bit of that and see if he actually got hired through CAA. You know what I'm saying? If his media career is taken off. So Cody, tell us what's going on.
All right. So the first thing that came up, and it kind of occurred to me. I was looking at a few things over the past few weeks. So obviously one of the big things in the news is the big, respiratory illness right now going around the coronavirus. So this is an article I saw getting passed around. A lot of people were sharing it. I'm not going to go into the whole article because it just kind of led me into thinking about something. So here they refer to it as they say, cancel everything. Social distancing is the only way to stop the spread. We must start immediately. So I'm not going to advocate one way or the other. I'll have the link in the description if you want to read it. However, this did lead me to an interesting thought because I was thinking let's say we start canceling some things. Maybe sporting events seem to be like not letting fans go to sporting events. That's common in parts of the world. I believe Italy's not letting fans. Actually, Italy now has canceled all their soccer matches. For a while, though, fans weren't allowed in. I believe also like Japanese Baseball League, I think, was playing games without fans, throwing stuff around. However, I'm sure a lot of you guys know, we're having kind of Super Tuesday 2, I guess, going on right now. But there is a big vote today, and I want to say 6 or 7 states that are voting today. And one of the main states voting today, not main, but a big state in the West Coast, definitely one Bernie Sanders. We'll get into later why. Definitely a state Bernie Sanders is going to want to hold on to is Washington State. So I want to talk about this first because if you guys have been following what's going on with this, Washington State is one of the harder hit parts in the country. There is a senior living home that got hit really hard. However, what's really interesting about Washington State for this, and one reason I want to bring this up is because I was like, oh no, we have a lot of people coming out. Even if it's not a big deal, it's a big thing. Very fascinating. Primary election day could have been a lot worse for officials in Washington State, the epicenter of the U.S. outbreak, but the state votes entirely by mail, which is fascinating. I honestly didn't know that. The entire state votes by mail. Now, they are telling people not to lick the envelopes, and I do believe later in the article they mentioned that people are handling these envelopes with gloves and masks and are going to be handling things a bit differently than normal. But that was just a really fascinating thing because the first thing I saw, I was like, oh, Washington's, I mean, I get it. We don't have to shut down every part of the entire country, but Washington's definitely a part of the country. It definitely maybe should have some more precautions than others, and very fascinating to see that there is, first of all, no. Now, second of all, in other states, because I don't want to highlight the government's response to this I want to see if I can get the right one up. But I believe in the state of Georgia, they're basically just telling people to kind of go ahead as planned to vote like you normally would. And they're actually trying to encourage people to get out and definitely vote in the upcoming primary. Here we go. So I want to highlight. Now, it is a little bit interesting because you'll notice the AFL-CIO also just canceled a presidential forum just a few lines above this. But on top of that, it does seem like when you're talking to the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, they still say that if you want to talk about large gatherings in a place you have community spread, I think that's a judgment call. And if someone decides they want to cancel it, I wouldn't publicly criticize them for it. Now, I would say it might make sense. Some people would say it isn't, but definitely it still doesn't seem to be by anyone's estimation the oh my god cancel everything phase as some people are calling for. But I do have to wonder, at what point is something like a political rally something that gets canceled? Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Because it is just like 10,000 people going together somewhere.
Maybe this is just because I was in show choir in high school and I'm used to drama queens. But anytime somebody runs into a group of people and says, whoa, stop the presses, hold on, OMG, they're usually a drama queen. And what they're about to say is at best an overstatement, at worst a cry for attention.
Okay, but universities have already canceled classes. I do want to highlight that.
It's overhyped, man. It's overhyped. Yeah, canceling classes, I don't think so. Telling people, hey, look, self-quarantine if you have symptoms of regular flu or what could be coronavirus or what could be one of the other million of communicable diseases, and let's really do our best to keep ourselves from spreading this disease in the active population. But we cannot shut our country down, okay, because of COVID-19.
Okay, but I don't think anyone is advocating for that right now. All I'm saying is that
cancel everything is a pretty, so I get it's a salacious headline.
Like I said, I never advocated for that. All I'm talking about is, do you think or not? I just, looking ahead at the way things are going, like I said, I'm not going either way on what you should or shouldn't do. I'm not here telling what to do. I'm just saying, looking ahead, it looks like we're running into a possibility where it's going to start getting awkward for these people campaigning.
Well, no,
seriously,
Ganu already has. People
when
are
you're
trying
running
to...
for president, as from the pre-show, when you're running for president, think of how many people you touch, shake hands with, and speak to, and how many states, and how in a day. Now, Joe Biden seems to be campaigning a little bit less strenuously than that. He's still moving around. But I've seen Bernie Sanders give like rallies in 2 different states in one day. At a certain point, you have to just say, it's almost at a certain point, if there's anything going around, you'd be like, well, maybe I shouldn't be everywhere all the time, but you're running for president. It's tough, right?
I think it puts the candidates themselves in an extremely difficult position, especially with the variance of optics here. Because, for example, if you decide, no, I want to have this event, the people have lined up to see me, you know what I'm saying? I'm going to go have this event. Well, you might be perceived as stupid for shaking everybody's hands and then subjecting yourself to the possibility of that disease, especially if you're very elderly, like all of our political candidates are now. Okay. So do you do it with a mask on and then just look like a tinfoil hat person, or maybe a little bit more responsible, but then all of a sudden, I don't know if people want to shake your hand because does that mean you have the coronavirus? So that's no good. What's the other option? Just plain old canceling it? I do not envy the position of the candidates that are running for president right now, because it does seem like a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
Well, it's tough, and I do want to highlight some options people have proposed for if you do want to go campaign in a state where maybe it's a little bit tougher to necessarily, like they are doing some of these precautions being put into place. Bernie Sanders has the infrastructure on seems pretty good. I really hope this chat doesn't get me burned here. I'm just going to flash it for a second, guys. But this is a replay of Bernie's rally from, I think, a day ago. And this is all done by him through his campaign. So obviously maybe he won't be able to have the live turnout if they were to do something like this. But Bernie Sanders actually does have a pretty good way to effectively get his message out to people through a live stream. So that's one way of doing it. But yeah, it just is really... It's really fascinating because I was thinking, like what is literally the stereotype of the politician? Is you're out there shaking hands, kissing babies. Like that's what people say, and it's just the
babies are fine because underneath the age of 5 hasn't gotten anybody yet.
But still, it's just this idea that like it really is rough because there is something going around out there. We are seeing people looking to move towards not canceling but relocating. I want to show you one thing. Unfortunately, they're talking about perhaps reevaluating, I believe, is even the convention. This is from Joe, I believe, Salmonese, the chief executive of the Democratic Convention set for July in Milwaukee, said in a statement that every convention requires developing a number of contingency plans to provide for a variety of scenarios, which kind of means nothing. But he continues, as we prepare to welcome Americans to Milwaukee this summer, the convention team will remain in constant communication with the local, state, and federal authorities responsible for protecting public health and security. So, I mean, because if it does get to a point where it is weird, though. I think, and also the other reason why it brings into question is this. I definitely agree that there's a big line between, oh my God, freak out, shut the country down, and canceling certain non-essential events or postponing them for a few weeks, right? Those are two different things. But, like, where does something like the Democratic Party National Convention fall into? When you think about it, like, could they really not do it with everybody present in one room? Would it really be impossible?
Yeah, I was about to say,
it's
kind of like Japanese baseball. Could they really hold a convention? No, because there's like audible votes that people take.
Well, they could come up with
you need the crowd there.
They come up with other ways of doing it, though, right?
But in time, ways that are oh gosh, that is a really tough one. I think you actually could have a virtual convention, and that could be a very interesting experience, but it would require an amount of technology that just wouldn't be worth it. You would just postpone it to a later date. I think virtual conventions where everybody had VR glasses could be actually pretty sick.
Well, I think that's a side note and a tangent. I think virtual town halls are the future. Now, one last thing I wanna cover on here, just to put into perspective. I brought this up before, not perspective. I just want to bring it up. Another thing is interesting. One thing that was very interesting though was that LA County definitely LA County. I don't want to say they waited, but LA County declared a state of emergency to battle the epidemic. I believe 9 hours after the poll closed on Super Tuesday. Yeah. And I do wonder if we'll see something like that happen in any other states. I just wonder if you don't want to start freaking people out and causing panic right before Election Day. Yeah. I do agree. Because like I said, it's the kind of thing where I don't know one day or the other. But I do wonder if we'll see a similar occurrence here. But it is weird. It is, as they mentioned, the last precedent we have for this was the Spanish flu outbreak in 1918, where, of course, we have less reporting because there was just less media at the time. We know less about it. And it wasn't a presidential election. There wasn't travel. It wasn't quite, we weren't seeing people selling out auditoriums.
We had a much lower population.
Voting was different. It was a different world.
But there was a lot of things that were very similar, though. In fact,
still uncharted waters in a way.
No, but I would say that there were some things that were extremely, very similar. Culturally, we're a lot more similar to the 1918 and 1920s than we were the 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s. Okay. I do believe that the old way of traveling by rail was equivalent to the modern day airline phenomenon.
It's not.
Okay.
This is not.
No, very much so. A lot of people packed
the distance you travel in a plane in a short period of time is so much greater, allowing you to be in multiple places in a shorter period of time, allowing you to overall visit more and more and more and more and more places.
No, but you're still in a small cabin with about 200 people.
But it's not the physical being in it. It's what the plane, it's the places the plane lets you go to. Like I said, Bernie Sanders is literally holding a rally in one state and then 20 hours later holding a rally in another state, 7 hours later doing a town hall, and 15 hours later holding another rally. It wasn't like that in 9 states like it is now. That's the new thing about the world we live in now.
Yeah, so it's definitely augmented, in which now our brave new world, you're right, you're not going as far on a train, okay? However, you didn't have as many drugs back then, or the scientific analysis and the ability to test and the ability to understand. So we have an augmented exposure, but we also have an augmented ability to combat that exposure. So whether or not it's Spanish flu in 1918, where there was less population, less exposure, but some very similar means of travel and, exposure of a communicable disease, I think there's some rough comparisons that could be made. You know what I'm saying? I think there's definitely some rough comparisons.
You shake more hands and kiss more babies now is the problem. It just, what I'm trying to bring up is, if you have, it's just a really interesting problem. I don't want to get too much into the weirdness of it, but it's a fascinating problem. What do you do when you have something that they're worried of community spread during a presidential election?
Well, yeah, and then also, how do you
come out to rallies? People are being encouraged to go knock on doors. People are being encouraged to go show up and vote. These are all things that are just like people directly coming into contact with each other. But it's weird. These are things. For example, we highlighted Washington State votes entirely by mail, which is one way of doing it. Now,
but what do you do in a state where a lot of people are staying home from the ballot box? It almost kind of becomes almost like a voting rights question. You know, like, how do we handle this? Because if people are registered to vote, but they're not permanent absentee ballot voters, like I think it's still the vast majority of Californians vote on election day. Yeah. I think it's about 40 or 50% of our state.
Which is smart. Because, by the way, if you voted early in California or Super Tuesday, you might have voted by accident for someone like a Pete Buttigieg or an Amy Klobuchar or a Tom Steyer who dropped out of the race by the time the polls closed. That happened to a lot of people. No, not only did they drop out, a couple of those people, Klobuchar and Buttigieg, they dropped out and told you to vote for someone else, but it was too late because you voted for them.
So what do you do in one of these small states? Let's just say like Oregon, where 3/4 of the people are going to show up in the ballot box, 1/4 of the people vote by mail, but now half of that voting population doesn't show up. This is really kind of where that terminology and legal nomenclature, acts of God, comes in. Because if this were because of a gang or because of a political group intimidating half of the population from not showing up, it would become a voting rights issue, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 would kick in. But a disease is not a person, but it is intimidating people out of going to the ballot box and voting. So
it's a tough problem. Like, how do you limit community events?
I mean, do you say
that
the results are invalid of this election and so won, but we have to redo it 30 days from now? That would never fly.
Well, no, that's not.
You know what I'm saying? That would never fly. So it just seems like we're gonna have to, just like you have to let the flu go through your system, and you get over it in 3 or 4 days. We're just gonna have to see how this really affects the election, and I don't see much of anything that can be done, at least from a not a voter integrity, but a voting commission standpoint, other than just having the elections and let the chips fall where they are, because it's always been this way. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, this is something we haven't encountered like this before, and I do wonder if we will start having to see candidates change their travel schedules, change how they host events, I just really do wonder if that will be the future of this. And it's just unfortunate, because even if it is something that really has about a 5 or 6, maybe let's say 6-month real run of issue in the country, that will just still be up until the election. Like it is. And here's the other thing. That's obviously more important things at stake in the country, like if people are dying, than the election. So that's nothing to keep in mind, right? Would you see, now this is nowhere near postponing an election yet, but it is weird. It is a weird wrinkle to add to things like voting in political rallies. This idea of like practice social distancing, but make sure I go to the Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders rally and show up and vote. It is kind of a conflicting message, but it's also, both seem to have merit and be important, right? Where it's like, well, you don't want to get sick and get others sick. It's going around right now, 1. But 2, you don't want to just sit in the sidelines for an entire election season. It's really weird, man. I think it is, I don't know. I disagree that this is something we have ever faced before. This is something that we haven't had to deal with in an election. Just the idea, like when you proverbially when you can no longer do the shaking of the hands and the kissing of the babies, it will change how you run for president. It will. And when people don't feel as much, like, it will change balloting. I do like the idea of the voting by mail. Obviously, every country can do it, or county and state. I also do want to highlight as well, because I don't want to freak people out, that, where is it? According to the, when we reached out to comment, they got a comment from, I'm trying to pull the quote up for you guys, from the Postal Service, that right now they have no fears that the virus is spreading through mail. So it's one of the reasons why they're definitely for the mail voting. They say it's a good idea. They're still telling people not to lick the envelopes, but even then it appears, here we go. So the quote I was looking for, sorry guys. It says, in a statement given to ABC News Monday, David Partenheimer, the manager of public relations at the United States Postal Service, said both the Surgeon General and the director of National Institute for Allergies and Infectious Diseases have indicated that there is currently no evidence that the virus can spread through the mail. So that's good. It's another reason why voting by mail is good. Another reason why they're still having the election. It's going on as planned. I just do think it's an interesting wrinkle.
Yeah, this might be the end of ballot harvesting in California.
No, but again, is that
nobody wants to collect those third-party ballots? Is
that not to your point though? Again, it's another one of those things involved in the American political system that basically is showing up and physically interacting with someone or something, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's just still a big part of our political. Even though we've tried to move so much online, people try. Like Bernie Sanders streams all of his own rallies himself. He does the streaming. Joe Biden still relies mainly on press to cover his rallies. I think it's really smart for Bernie Sanders to not do that and control it himself. So there is still people doing stuff their own way. It's not like it's the end of it. It's just, it is weird. It's interesting to note, and I'm keeping an eye on it, especially after today. I want to see what happens today with voting. I don't necessarily think it'll affect turnout as much as it'll affect kind of, for example, in Florida, they're planning to move voting sites away from retirement communities. In Florida, there was multiple that were going to be
Hey, but that's just ageist. Now you're making it more difficult for the most vulnerable to be able to attend an election event. So, that's just ageism right there. See, that's why I'm saying that.
No, here's the thing. Literally, nobody but you facetiously making up that straw man has ever made that point. So,
no.
You're arguing nobody, unfortunately.
No, this isn't a straw man argument. I'm saying that is literally how people react to this.
No, it literally isn't, because I'm literally a person who literally is watching this, and literally nobody's saying that, dude.
No. Maybe
nobody's saying how dare they not, because guess what? They could still have transportation services to get there. They're just moving the polling centers out of literally being inside of the old folks' homes.
If you're trying to say that there's not elements in our society that purposefully or inadvertently misinterpret things in the most cynical light possible, then I can't.
You mean what you're doing right now?
As an example of how things can be misinterpreted? Yes.
I don't know, man. I feel like
As an example of how things can be
I feel like you look for
misinterpreted,
things
yes.
till you find them.
This is Problem Solver Politics. We'll see you guys in the next video.